Hello. Today we're going to focus on something we haven't spent too much time on before, cost-effective legal research. It's really easy in law school to forget how expensive legal research platforms like Lexis and Westlaw can be. You can easily get in the habit of relying exclusively on these expensive legal research platforms, Lexis, Bloomberg, Westlaw, and why wouldn't you? These platforms are great. They make legal research easy. Well, as easy as it can be anyway. In practice, though, you will need to be more cost conscious. It's just a fact of life. That certainly doesn't mean that you should never use Lexis, Westlaw, or Bloomberg. Your firm pays for these databases, so they're available to you after all. In fact, your time, the hourly fee that clients are charged for your services, is the most expensive item that a client will find on their bill. So if you can get a more efficient answer to a legal question using Lexis, Westlaw, or Bloomberg, that efficiency is what your firm is paying Lexis and Westlaw and Bloomberg for, and you should use them to get your answer. If, on the other hand, you can incorporate free resources like the internet, free legal research platforms like the ones that are put out by the government, like FDSys, for example, and print. Don't forget about print. Print, once your firm buys a book or a set of books, then your use thereafter is free. Anyway, if you can incorporate these resources into your research plan and you can still do your legal research efficiently, everyone wins. All right, so this is our agenda for today. For the video lecture, this part of the lecture, we'll talk about some techniques for using Westlaw and Lexis, but doing it more efficiently. We'll also spend some time talking about terms and connector searching, or Boolean searching, because if you're able to master this kind of searching, you'll always retrieve fewer results, but those results will be more highly relevant than you would have returned if you used a natural language search. Natural language is just like throwing whatever terms you can think of into a search bar like we would all do if we went to Google. And finally, for the video lecture, we'll spend a little bit of time looking at Fastcase. Fastcase is a low-cost legal research platform that you might use rather than Lexis or Westlaw for some of your research. The reason why I mentioned Fastcase in particular is because it's available for free with New York State Bar membership. So if you become a member of the New York State Bar, you'll also have access to Fastcase. Okay, so then for the class lecture, we'll explore all sorts of different free resources that are available on the internet. I think you'll be amazed to see the resources that are available that are out there. They're credible, they're good, and they're free. All right, for now, let's spend a minute talking about how Lexis and Westlaw bill law firms. First of all, this is changing. In the past, Lexis and Westlaw charged by the hour, and everyone has always heard these horror stories about the hapless summer associate who researched something for 40 hours and ran up a $10,000 electronic research bill. Fortunately, most firms are able and do negotiate more global access now, so this doesn't really happen anymore. Mostly firms negotiate a flat monthly rate that's based on the number of attorneys using the platform and probably based on the use during the last few years. So if they're using it a lot, the fee will be a little bit higher. If they don't use it so much, the fee will be a little bit lower. Keep in mind that firms may choose not to pay to access all of the individual Lexis and Westlaw databases that you're familiar with here under our BLS academic subscription. We have a lot here under the academic subscription. Smaller firms and solo practitioners might also choose to pay per search or by the hour. So not every firm still has one of these global flat fee arrangements. So it's good to keep that in mind, and obviously something that you need to know before you make a research plan. So why do we care about this, assuming that most firms have these unlimited use per monthly charge plans now? Even if your firm's paying one of these kind of flat rates, you still need to worry about using cost-effective techniques because, as I mentioned, some resources may not be available under your firm's flat rate plan. So if you need to go into those databases, you need to know how to do it efficiently. And these out-of-plan charges tend to be very expensive. Also, the flat rate that your firm pays, as I mentioned a little bit before, so the flat rate that you're paying in the next year is largely going to be dependent on how much resources that your firm used in that platform in the current year. So if associates are inefficient in running up lots of electronic research charges, the flat rate's going to go up for the next year, which is going to make everybody unhappy, of course. Now we're going to just talk about recovery, which basically that's a kind of a legal billing term of art. How do you get the money back that's going out the door in law firms? When I started practicing electronic research costs, Lexis and Westlaw almost always appeared as a separate charge on the client's bill. Then clients started complaining about this charge back when they got a little bit more power and the economy went bad. And these fees for electronic research always seem to bother them more than attorney time. And I'm not sure why, because the attorney time component was far larger than the electronic research, but they just didn't like paying for electronic research. So separate charging and cost recovery for electronic research is becoming less and less common. And before you start crying for all the poor law firms, though, all this means is that the firm is just incorporating the cost of electronic research into the hourly fee that they charge the clients for attorney time. The clients just aren't seeing the cost as a separate item on their bill anymore. So they're still recovering the cost. They're just kind of doing it in a different way. All right, so let's move on from how Westlaw and Lexis price their research and how firms try to recover the cost of that research. And let's move into the nuts and bolts of how you can be more efficient with your research when you use these platforms. After all, efficient research means that you're saving both time and money, which is good for your clients, your firm, and you. The first tip is to develop a research plan before you sign on to Westlaw or Lexis. This is going back to what we talked about in the first class, which is to take some time and think through what you're going to do before you actually start doing it and before you actually sign on to do your research, plan it out. Consider the facts presented to you and try and figure out what legal issue or issues need to be solved. Use the internet, print secondary sources, and your assigning partner or peers to help you issue spot. All of this is free. And also before signing on, figure out, if you can, what is the applicable jurisdiction. This way you can do a narrow search in just federal cases, for example, or New York statutes, if that's where it is, rather than running a broad search across the Westlaw landing page of everything and getting back thousands of results, many of which won't even be relevant to the question you're trying to research. So next, if you have a citation to anything, if there's a client letter and they're asking a question, if there's a memorandum from a regulator and they're saying your client violated a certain regulation, or if there's a case that you're trying to respond to in a complaint, use that to start your research. So use that to get your answer. Hopefully through this class, you now know how to take a statute and then use the notes of decision and shepherds and key cite to get cases and administrative materials interpreting the statute. You hopefully also know now how to take a case, if that's what you have, and use the key number system and the citing references to get more cases, statutes, and regulations that are on point with your issue. You can even use these methods to get secondary resources if you need help finding additional primary law, or even if you just need help finding out what the primary law is saying. Remember, that's always a good thing to do, is go to the statute, get a secondary resource that's citing to the statute, and then take advantage of the experts out there that have written on this to help you understand what the statute is saying. And then you can use the same methods to go get additional primary law to cite to the court, or to help answer your corporate client's question, or to write the letter back to the regulator and explain why your client did not, in fact, violate that regulation. All right, so as I said earlier, don't run a general Google-like search from Lexis or Westlaw from the landing page if you can figure out how to run a narrow search. It's better to get 20 highly relevant results than 300 results that may or may not help you solve your issue. So take advantage of those filters on Lexis and Westlaw. Even if you start with a broad search because you're afraid you're going to miss something, and that happens sometimes, and it's okay. Use the filters afterward, though, and the search within box after you get your search results to narrow down your answer. And then keep in mind that on Lexis and Westlaw, you can save your results. I use folders all the time. I have so many folders set up on both Lexis and Westlaw of different research projects that I've worked on or that I'm working on. Even if I think the research project's complete, I want to be able to go back to it again later. And why not? It's free. It doesn't cost anything to set up a folder. The other thing Lexis and Westlaw do is they keep extensive histories of your searches and your results. So if you forgot to put it in a folder, you forgot to save it, you can view your history for free on Westlaw for a whole year and for 90 days on Lexis. And then also keep in mind that if you're in, say, a treatise, or you're in any kind of secondary resource with the table of contents or index, you can view those and browse them for free. So you can go ahead and look at the table of contents in the index and see, does it have something, that particular resource, that's going to help you before you start paying any money. That helps you to just not run multiple keyword searches in the same source. You can just go and look at those table of contents like you would if you were looking at a book. So let's take a look at the way that this works, some of the things that I just talked about. I've talked about it, now I'm going to show it to you. So here on Westlaw, you can see there right at the top, there's your folders, there's your history. Here on Lexis, you just go, there's your history, and then you drop down the More tab to get to folders. And here's those filters that I was talking about. So I have a bunch of results here. I did a very broad search, sex-based discrimination. But if I use the search within, so I did sex-based discrimination, but now I narrowed it down to say that I want it to be mentioning the phrase academic institution, and then it's going to give me much more highly relevant results. I'm not missing anything. I start seeing what's there in the 29,000 results, and I realize I have no desire to read 29,000 documents. So I come up with a way to get them more relevant and fewer at the same time. Here I am on Westlaw. You can see it's the same sort of idea here. There's all these filters over on the left that you can use after, and there's that search within results. And I find this to be a very effective tool, this search within results, because I've already got this kind of pile of relevant results, and now I'm going to make it even more relevant by coming up with an additional keyword combination. Okay, so moving on from our focus on just exclusively Lexis and Westlaw, here's another really good tip for saving some money when you're conducting legal research, and that is use the internet, but only up to a certain point. I still do this with almost every legal research problem that I come across because it's just my habit from when I was a practicing lawyer. Use the internet to learn how lawyers are talking about a particular area of the law. What are their terms of art? How do they frame the issues? Who are the regulators? And who are the other big players in the area that you need to go and research? Reading this kind of background information on the internet also allows you to determine if it's New York regulations or federal case law that's likely to give you your answer. That way you can focus your energies on these particular databases when you get to Lexis or Westlaw. You can also run as many searches as you want for free on Google and see what search terms seem to lead you to the best information. And then you can take those search terms and plug them into Lexis or Westlaw when you get there. So you can see that you can do a little bit of pre-research, and then you're more efficient when you get to the paid databases. So after you've done that pre-research and when you get onto Westlaw or Lexis, you can use the platforms not to issue spot, not to figure out jurisdiction, not to run 10 or 15 searches to get your answer. Instead, you'll use the platforms for what they can do that other resources cannot. Things like headnotes and key numbers, shepherds and KeyCite. You're not going to find those on Google. You're not going to find them on any free resource, actually. All right, so just the last few tips, and I'll show you how this actually works on Lexis and Westlaw in a minute. Do find out how your firm pays for its legal research. If the firm's paying per hour, you're going to use Lexis and Westlaw differently than if your firm pays a flat rate. So you need to know that almost from before you ever sign on to the platform on your first day of work. Also, make sure you take advantage of the tutorials and the research attorneys that are available on Lexis and Westlaw. They're both excellent and they're both free. So let's take a look at how you find this stuff on Lexis and Westlaw. Here we are in Westlaw, right from the landing page, Tools, and there's this subscriber pricing guide. My content will tell you what databases your library subscribes to so that you'll know what is in plan and what is out of plan. On Lexis, you would just go to this drop-down More again, and there's the price guide. Okay, so that's it for pricing in Lexis and Westlaw and how we can do searching more efficiently. Now we're going to move on to another topic that's near and dear to my heart, and certainly is a way to increase your efficiency as a legal researcher, and that is to use Boolean searching. What is that? Boolean searching is a search method that allows legal researchers to return fewer but more highly relevant results. Put it another way, you'll have fewer results to sort through, and your results will be more likely to answer your legal question. So it's great. Boolean search methods can be used on Westlaw, Lexis, Bloomberg, and as I mentioned before, even on the internet. When you construct a Boolean search, you're telling the database that you're searching for only those results that meet the parameters that you set. So if you say you want only results that mention negligent and driver, you're going to end up getting automobile accident cases only rather than the whole world of cases talking about negligence in other contexts. Fewer results, but more highly relevant to what you're trying to accomplish. All right, so let's take a look at some of the operators and the terms and connectors that we can use to construct a Boolean search. If you put a series of words in quotes, you're telling the database retrieve documents containing only that exact phrase. So you have to be careful that you know what you're doing with that, because you have to get the exact phrase that you want, and sometimes you don't know how a statute or a case is going to phrase something. But if you're sure that's what you want, then put it in quotes and it will retrieve only documents that have that exact phrase appearing in that exact order. The explanation point, you see it up there in my negligence, is a root expander. So if I put BIT exclamation point, I'm telling the database to retrieve anything BIT with anything after it. So it's going to get bite, bites, biting, bitten. Then there's this universal character. Don't use it as often, but if you, for instance, you didn't care if you got woman or women, you could put that universal character, which is the star, the asterisk, in, and it would retrieve anything that had WOM, anything in. And is something that you use all the time. Obviously, you could put dog and bite, and so you're going to at least get documents that have all of those, but it's really more effective to use in combination with some of these other operators and terms and connectors that we have. So for example, if I were doing what you had all done when you were doing the scaffold case, I could put in the phrase labor law 240 and recalcitrant worker. So I'm only going to get cases that are talking about the recalcitrant worker in the context of a labor law 240 case. Or retrieves documents with one or another search term, which is not so useful on its own, but again, it is useful if you put it in connection with other terms and connectors. So again, I'm going to do labor law 240 and now I'm putting in parentheses either sole proximate cause as a phrase or recalcitrant worker. So it's going to bring up those that mention labor law 240 and the phrase sole proximate cause. And it's also going to bring up the cases that mention labor law 240 and recalcitrant worker. So it'll give me both because maybe I want to look at both of those things. So that's another one to keep in mind. This at least number retrieves only those documents that include the word that you're putting there at least blank number of times, and you can put in whatever you want. Make sure you keep this all kind of smashed together when you do this. At least 5, sole proximate cause means that that term that I put in there, sole proximate cause, is going to appear at least 5 times, which means that it's playing a pretty big role in the court's analysis. It's not just mentioned once. These next two I use constantly, almost every search I do. So /P retrieves documents that have both search words that you're giving within a single paragraph. So labor law 240 within a paragraph of damages. /S means it's retrieving documents with both search terms appearing in a single sentence. So scaffold within a sentence of fall. It's going to retrieve only if those 2 words are in the same sentence. And you can keep going on and on and on. You can connect as many words as you want in a single search. Again, getting more and more relevant as you go along. And then /number retrieves documents with 2 search words appearing within a certain number of each other. So proximate within 3 words of cause in any order. So cause can appear before proximate or proximate before cause, but they have to be within 3 words of each other in the document that the database is going to retrieve for you. All right, so that wraps up Boolean searching. That's obviously something that can take a lifetime of practice to get really good at, but is probably worth focusing some energies on because you'll save yourself time and you'll be more efficient in your research. Now we're just going to spend a few minutes before I wrap it up here talking about FastCase. So here is a list that talks about the legal research platforms that are available for free to people who are members of their state bar. And here we are in New York. So if you click on that, it's telling us from the State Bar Association website that if you're a member, you receive free and unlimited access to basically the New York libraries in FastCase. So let's talk a little bit more about FastCase because this is kind of interesting. If you're a solo practitioner, you can get access to this through your bar membership. It allows natural language or Boolean searching. It provides a service called Authority Check, which is not the same thing as Shepard's or KeyCite, but it's something. We'll talk about it in a minute. And this is pretty new within the last year or so. FastCase has entered into a partnership with Hein Online, which you may be familiar with here at BLS. And in Hein, federal and state cases are going to appear as hyperlinks so that you can go to FastCase and get the cases. And in FastCase, Hein materials are going to be integrated into search results. Basically, Hein has all these great law review articles, so you can then look at an abstract of a law review article and see if it's something that's going to help you. It's a secondary resource. It's going to help you interpret your statute. You can't get full access to the articles if you're not already, or your firm's not already a Hein subscriber, but you could maybe go track down the article somewhere else, or at least know that there's an article out there that's going to be interesting to you. So what is Authority Check? Basically, it's telling you what other cases are citing your case, but it's not making an editorial decision. There's not an attorney that sat and looked and read these cases and decided, do any of them overturn your case? So it's not the same thing as Shepard's or KeyCite. It's not a replacement for them, but it's something that you can use when you're using FastCase to sort of get additional relevant precedent to argue your case. But I think as a responsible attorney, it's fair to say that you would still have to go do a Shepard's or a KeyCite before you could rely on a case or a statute to cite them either to a court or to your client. So keep in mind, whereas here at BLS, we have access to not only the federal law collection, if you get this fast case through your New York State Bar Association membership, you'll only have access to New York. There's no head notes, there's no key numbers, there's no annotations, and there's no secondary resources other than, as I mentioned, these links to the abstract of Hine law review articles. So here's what the landing page looks like on Fastcase, and it gives you different ways to search. You can do a case law search, you could do statutes, regulations, you could search court rules, pick your jurisdiction. If you're a bar member, you'll only have New York, but here you'd have to choose that you wanted to search New York. And now I'm going to do a Boolean search, labor law 240 within 5 of sole proximate cause. And now you can see I've gotten 81 results searching cases. And there's those Hine law review articles that I was mentioning before, so I could click into them and take a look at them, or at least look at the abstract if I wasn't a Hine subscriber. Here's my results list. If I click on this tab and say results, then I can choose to sort them in a different way. And what I find really helpful when I do Fastcase is to go ahead and sort them by that case that was cited the most by all of the other cases that are appearing in this results list. So if there's 68 cases that I got, I want to find the one that those 68 cases cited the most. Which one was cited the most often? All right, so now let's assume I want to look at the Blake case in Fastcase. So I click on the link, and there you see it is. And then I can do the same kind of things that I could do in Westlaw or Lexis, save it, can print it, can add it to a folder, or I can email it. And now there's another interesting thing that you want to look at. If you're looking at a case, you'd want to click on this authority check, which is what we were talking about in the beginning. And here now is this graphic of all of the cases that have cited to Blake. And the different sizes of the circles show how often that case, the citing case, has been cited itself. So if I click on that one, that's Cahill. So Cahill has cited to Blake, and Cahill itself has been cited many times. That's why it's a big circle. So that kind of helps me to see how these cases are related, which ones are important by the size of the circles. Let's assume that we knew we wanted to look at Labor Law 240. How do we do that on Fastcase? So we're going to browse to the statute that we need. So we start out on the landing page, search statutes. Then we go to browse rather than doing a keyword search, which we could also do. And then here I've kind of just worked my way down, just like I would on Lexis or Westlaw, to Labor Law 240. Click on it, and then it appears, you can see over there, the full text of the statute on the right-hand side. If I scroll down a bit, it's actually got case notes, just like you would find on Lexis or Westlaw. So there are the relevant cases that are citing to Labor Law 240. This is the part of this authority check that Fastcase does. And I can see here in this over all the way to the right, how often has this case, this Ross v. Curtis Palmer, been cited by the other cases in Fastcase database. And that's kind of a way to tell, is that an important case or not? If it's being cited a lot, it's probably going to be a Court of Appeals case, and it's probably going to be an important Labor Law 240 case. So it's a good way to get to the relevant authority. Not as good as doing a site check on Lexis or Westlaw, but if you're working in Fastcase, this is a good way to get to the big cases in your particular area, either that are responsive to the keyword search that you put in or are responsive to the statute that you browse to, like we did here. All right, so we talked a little bit in the beginning, and now we'll talk a little bit more to kind of wrap things up here. When you're using free resources, you really have to be careful. You have to know whether the source is reliable and current. Otherwise, you're obviously not saving anybody anything if you're relying on statute that's been amended or abrogated or case law that's been overturned or just isn't relevant anymore. And you probably learned something about evaluating resources when you were an undergrad and you first started doing term papers and stuff where you had to rely on resources. And I think it boils down to a basic idea of being a skeptic about everything that you read until you satisfy yourself that you can trust the source. And as a legal researcher, the stakes are even higher than you're an undergrad, because if you're relying on a resource to give legal advice, you don't want to commit malpractice, of course. So if you're on Lexis or Westlaw, you can feel pretty comfortable about credibility. If you're looking at a free resource on the internet, you have to be more careful. You have to look and see, is the resource current or is it outdated? Is it from a reliable provider? Is it the federal government putting the resource out there? Because then you can rely on it a little bit more. Or is it some random attorney that may not understand the intricacies of the law that they're writing about? And that absolutely happens. There's self-proclaimed experts out there. Doesn't necessarily mean they know what they're talking about, or they're citing the correct law, or they're interpreting the law correctly that they are citing. So keep in mind that your time is very expensive to your clients. Usually you're going to be billed out at a few $100s an hour. Sometimes you can get to a legal question in half the time using a paid database like Lexis or Westlaw. And in those cases, you should use the paid database. Absolutely. Your firm wants you to do that, and so do your clients. Save the free resources for those instances when you can use them efficiently. And hopefully this lecture has given you an idea of when those instances are. It's kind of when you're doing a combination type thing and you're trying to do issue spotting or figure out jurisdiction or terms of art, or it's when you already have in mind exactly what you want. So if you know that there's a particular provision of the U.S. code that you want to look at, there's no reason that you need to go on Lexis and Westlaw. If you have an expensive plan there, you can easily go on to FTSIS and get it for free. And we'll talk more about that in the in-class lecture. That's it for the video lecture. Don't forget to take our last quiz, which is the week 11 quiz, and submit your results by email. I'll see you in class.